COVID-19 has put the healthcare industry under a spotlight. It brought out many challenges that the healthcare sector and as a result customers faced. But the disruption has also thrown many opportunities for the sector. In fact, it has made digital adoption in healthcare a serious point of discussion. Hello and welcome to our Pivot or Perish series. I'm Deepthi Bhaskaran, and today our focus is on the healthcare sector, where we talk to experts to understand their journey through this pandemic and what lies ahead. Joining me to moderate the event is my colleague Neetu Chandra Sharma.
Hi.
On the panel today, we have Dr. Sangeeta Reddy, Joint MD Apollo Hospital, Umang Bora, MD and Global CEO of Cipla, Anil Vinayak, Group Chief Operating Officer, Fortis Healthcare, Prashant Tandon, Founder and CEO, 1MD, and Swapna Bapat, Senior Director, Sales, Engineering, Automation, Anywhere.
Good evening.
So I'm going to start the discussion by asking Sangeeta and Anil about the challenges that they faced in this pandemic. Initially treatment was under government control and then it opened up to the private sector. And then we saw a host of challenges faced by private hospitals in terms of availability of beds, escalation in costs, etc., etc. So, Sangeeta, maybe you should go first and sort of give us, how have your 4 months been?
So clearly 2020 will go down as the COVID year, or in some ways for the world, I think the reboot era. Undoubtedly, it's a year where humanity has realized that there's a new playbook. We need to do things differently. I believe that one of the important aspects of this entire scenario is that we are beginning to realize that healthcare is not just the responsibility of the hospital or of the doctor or of the government, but it's society as a whole. Because in as much as treatment played an important role, there was prevention, there was the importance of wearing a mask, there was the whole aspect of figuring out where to go. But just very quickly to talk about what we did, once we realized that this was significant, it was large, we needed to gear up, we created what we call the Apollo Kavach, which is a protective shield. The first level of the shield was really the right information for people. So using our mobile app, we did a risk scan. So the risk scan, which is enabled by artificial intelligence, kind of went through symptoms, scenarios, risk and exposure, told people what the risk was. Over 13 million people have taken the scan. The pharmacy stepped up in terms of availability of products, hygiene products, masks, sanitizers, and then the treatment. The hospitals began to understand that they need to gear up. First, I think we played a role in reaching out to government to ask, what are we going to do? What is the best way to do this? We spoke about building dedicated centers because India had the advantage of two things. One is the rest of the world got it a little earlier than us, and we had the lockdown. Taking the advantage of that planning, we actually said, can we create dedicated towers? Can we create, 500-bed hospitals? We'll all pool resources together. Some of those plans didn't happen, but at least as hospitals, we said we would not mix our COVID and non-COVID patients, because we must remember one very important thing, that cardiac emergencies or MIs or cancer or, accidents don't recognize corona. They come anyway. So we have to treat a stroke as well as a corona patient. So how do we isolate? How do we keep patients safe? Then came, I think, the very important aspect of what was the clinical protocol. Because if you see in the last 5 months, the treatment protocols have really evolved. So the need for us to stay connected with global best practice and then connect our own teams. Today we have almost 2,000 beds spread across 17, 18 locations, people in different cities. So we created, the right kind of team, Microsoft Teams, a daily update program, updation of the protocols. We are into our 24th edition of the COVID Red Book. which is the Apollo treatment protocol. And then we said, this is not just for us. We shared it widely with nursing homes. How do we bring in others to share this knowledge? So I think the combination of, steroid, antiviral, remdesivir, treatment, at what stage, the innovation on the prone, keeping the patient prone, the fact that you need N95 and the PPEs. Now we've gone into putting respirators wherever we can, or the personalized respirators. So all these protocols kept evolving. What's the right source of buying the PPE? How do we buy at scale so that our nurses are never exposed? All these were various learnings across medical teams, infrastructure, pharmacy and their supplies, advanced treatment, outpatient, the whole aspect of testing. We had to gear up our testing capability. Today we're doing over, I think, 3,000 tests per day for various this thing, but we had to gear up, train people, the reporting mechanisms, and then government policy. Every state had a different policy. So every hospital had to comply with their state policy while being guided with Apollo's central policy. So that combination was a huge learning as well. And I must say that, that the teams have really stepped up. And to summarize it, one of our people said, why are we doing all this? Why can't we just wait it out, continue to treat our patients? And then someone in the team said, we will stand up and fight COVID, whether it's with the government, supportive, whatever, we will do it because it's the right thing to do and because our patients expect it of us. So once that philosophy of caring and, taking care happened, then many steps of the Apollo Kavach came into place. And I think that we can write many books on this. Last line before I hand over to my colleagues, who actually I'm sure have had great stories as well, is that we spent good time building two other important things. One was the life after lockdown, the guideline for corporates and how they reopen. And that book has been widely shared, and, FICCI, CII, everybody used it. The other important one, which I'm very proud of, is the ventilator training program that we taught people how, those who hadn't used ventilator, and used the best in class learning management system, content, simulation. So many people have taken those online courses. And I think the telemedicine aspect itself has been amazing, because many of our patients who couldn't reach our doctors physically met them for the first time on telemedicine. And this is, it's been an inflection point for the adoption of telemedicine, and it's a change that's here to stay. And on this one, I must congratulate the government, because they actually brought out the regulation, which they had been working on for 3 or 4 years, I think, but it just came out in a few months. And
So we look
so that's
forward
been a great
to,
thing.
yeah, so we look forward to more books, certainly. Anil,
Yeah.
I would go over to you and ask you, and also, tell us a bit about the fact that, see, initially the treatment was under government control. And we know that in India, healthcare is, private sector is a huge part of healthcare in India, unlike the West. Um, so did that put you at a disadvantage, that you were not in the fight right from the word go, and you were sort of, private sector was brought in subsequently? Did that disrupt anything, or how was that experience?
So I'll correct that impression a bit.
Yeah.
While you're right that, in certain parts of the country, the government decided to do it themselves initially and then subsequently brought in the private sector. There were other parts of the country, like Mumbai, for example, where from the beginning, the government and private sector together worked to make sure that patients were getting treatment options. So I think we had that advantage of being in multiple geographies and therefore being more prepared. I think what this taught us really was, two words come to mind. One is uncertainty and how to deal with that. And second is constant evolution. And we learned what VUCA really means, right? Before this one had just, that was just a term. But when things are ever changing, when you start from a situation where you don't have cases in the country and you hear about all the stuff from abroad, and then constant evolution over many days and months, and then you come up with protocols that today perhaps are best in class. If you look at the kind of outcomes that the entire that the country is demonstrating today in terms of being able to manage reasonably large numbers, you kind of forget that most hospitals aren't equipped to handle, infectious diseases beyond a handful of numbers. And from there today, to have thousands of patients being treated in our healthcare infrastructure and treated with the best of outcomes is, I think, a huge journey that, together with the government, private sector hospitals have sort of walked that path. And I think through that journey, the learnings have been like in any change, you need to be on your feet. You need to have empowered teams at the front end who are watching, monitoring, making the decisions, and then constantly communicating within the cities, learning from each other, and making changes as you go along, not waiting for a perfect answer. So I think that's what we all collectively demonstrated. Sangeeta just talked about a lot of this. So just one small example, from zero telemedicine consults, right, in our network, to 20% of our current volumes being on teleconsult and video consult in a matter of 3 months or 4 months is remarkable. Similarly, like I said, from having perhaps not even, we started with just 150 beds devoted to COVID, and that took a lot of our effort to even set up in terms of manpower, treatment protocols, how do we staff it, how do we isolate it, and so on, how do we provide the PPE for it. And today we are at 1,200, and we have the confidence that if required, we can scale up further, right, all the way till the requirement is. So I think that's the beauty of what has been accomplished in the sector, and I feel very proud, along with my colleagues. Dr. Sangeeta ji, of course, is a stalwart of the industry, but everybody's played a very strong role of partnership, and I think the country should be proud of where we are. Of course, don't want to rest on our laurels. This is going to be the new normal, and that's another example. All the way back, 3rd of May, we published the first handbook that says that life has changed forever. And what does that mean for us in a hospital? And how do we change each touch point of the hospital in order to adapt? And that booklet is, again, like Sangeeta ji also mentioned, it's not a standalone or or a unchanging booklet. It's having to be revised as we go along. So I'm fairly confident that we will weather this together, and we come out of this stronger and with more resilience for the future in situations like this again.
Yeah, Anil, you have made a very valid point. So coming back to the revenues that healthcare sector has actually, been losing on. So revenues have definitely come under strain, and but now the economy is in phase 3 of the unlock. Has the situation improved, and how long before normalcy to return?
Okay, so yes, situation's improving, but slowly, right? Because like we said, this is the new normal, social distancing, and taking all possible precautions definitely is here to stay. Secondly, of course, there's this fear of hospitals, and there's this avoidance of what is termed as elective, right? And that continues. So there is a slow growth back. My sense is it will still take us several months before we are back to normal. Yes, of course, financially, it's putting a great deal of strain on all the healthcare providers, and we are no exception. But these are times that we have to tide over together.
So coming back to pharmaceutical sector, even for the pharmaceutical companies, this COVID-19 pandemic would have been a challenging time, given the race to come up with drugs to battle with the virus and certainly its supply also. So I would come to Umang. Umang, do take us through your journey.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. Yes.
Okay, good. Very good. So I said, the normal keeps changing. So you have microphones that are muted, unmuted, etc. But I think from our perspective, and let me give you a good snapshot of where we stand. I think if I was to take two things away from the COVID pandemic, the first is that humanity won, right? I think it's remarkable the type of work that's happened in hospitals. It's remarkable the type of work that we're seeing is happening with other intermediaries. I'm sure Prashant will speak after me, and it's just remarkable to see what's happened. And the second thing, I think this was a time when everyone really worked with their heart. And if I was to, step by and think about all the 25,000 employees that Cipla has, it's remarkable how much of working from the heart has really resulted in terms of what we could do for society. So those are two key big messages for me. But let's go back, let's rewind. March, we have 5,000 people at our sites, right? So the moment the pandemic hits, we've got to worry about how we plan for safety for these people, because if each of our employees can show up, then the hospitals can be supplied with medicines, then the rest of the healthcare system can work. So we've had to rapidly change things. We had to rapidly change how they were transported. We had to rapidly change how we maintain social distancing within a pharmaceutical setup. And finally, we also had to think about how we would deliver drugs. A lot of the country was in lockdown. We had to experiment with formats. We latched onto other forms of distribution, which were non-pharma as well, to make sure that medicines reached. But we also had to have the right product portfolio, right? And so getting remdesivir in, getting Actemra in, tocilizumab, we created a new range of hand sanitizers. So it was just remarkable how quickly we've repositioned our portfolio. It was truly remarkable how quickly we've repositioned our working habits, right? That there were times when, contrary to us calling everything new normal, I think a normal is redefined every week, right? So what is happening with our facilities in Sikkim is completely different than what's happening in our facilities in Indore. And remember, we're talking about 5,000 people coming into work every day, right? So we've learned how to decentralize our management a lot more. I think there's been tremendous site leadership across people. The leaders on the ground are making the difference everywhere. But it's so enthralling to see how everyone's worked from the heart. So portfolio, work processes, what we've done in our factories, all of that we've changed. But let me also talk about what we've learned. And I think that's more important. I keep mentioning this, there is no normal. The normal will keep getting redefined, right? So when we come back to work, there's a new normal. When we are right now in this situation, there's a normal. And this normal was very different than the normal when we began to lock down in March. So we're getting used to that. I think acceptance is the first thing for everyone, that there is, if you go back to your offices and you're wearing masks, it's not like before, right? You can't go out, you can't touch people, you can't hug them, you can't give them a pat on the back. It's very different. And I think the first thing is just this acceptance. But the bigger thing for us is just this whole ability, and what a wonderful opportunity to reimagine how healthcare is going to reach people. It's just remarkable. We're seeing, I think the gentleman before me from Fortis mentioned that there are so many teleconsults. We're seeing the same across. It's not just with doctors and hospitals. We're seeing huge teleconsults with doctors today in the way we reach the docs and the way the doctors are reaching their patients. We're seeing patients wanting to make this journey of illness to wellness by themselves, right? And I think now patients want to manage their health a lot better. And I'm sure Prashant will talk about it, just after that. But it's just remarkable, these shifts. I think in our industry, these dislocations happened and they existed. And we needed a crisis to be able to put and wrap these together. And I'm so glad and fortunate that we're in the middle of all of this, trying to reimagine how healthcare could be delivered in India. So it's been stressful, but it's been very exciting. And, at the end, just the spirit of humanity and the spirit of people working with their heart. That's truly come out tops for me in this entire pandemic.
The digital infrastructure sort of gaining center stage with telemedicine, e-pharmacies, etc. And rightly so, I think, Prashant, you should go next and sort of tell us about your experience really pre-COVID and post-COVID. Now has the focus been on the digital ecosystem to sort of complement the healthcare space? And what was it like pre-COVID? I'm very interested to sort of see the contrast in experience
Yeah, so
you
I
might have
think
had.
ours was one of those sectors that saw COVID as a structural boost, and suddenly we were dealing with the demand, the scale of which we had to gear up overnight almost, and in a lot of ways, and I completely echo what Umang just mentioned. It's seeing the teams step up, put their heart into something, and also do it with a spirit of service. I think once there's a mission mode, there's a crisis, you just realize that, okay, there was so much energy and latent potential that was waiting to be unleashed. And It's just fascinating to see that happen. So what happened pre-COVID? Of course, I think uh, for a lot of people or for a bunch of the ecosystem, digital health was on the periphery. It was a good to have. It was a service for convenience and cost benefit, but not necessarily mainstream. And I think that structurally changed with COVID. What has changed is starting from of course, from the consumer perspective. And as a platform, our business is basically providing information, e-pharmacy, e-diagnostics, and telemedicine. And all these lines of business just saw a very different normal, so to speak. And what was it was the thing that happened was a lot of people who had never tried the digital channel now were online asking for all these services, trying to learn how these platforms work, and because nobody wanted to expose themselves into any uh, situation or a place which could be a center of infection. And um, uh, for better or worse, healthcare facilities top that list. So going to a doctor's clinic, a diagnostic lab, or a pharmacy for something that was not related to COVID was a big no-no. And e-pharmacy, e-diagnostics, e-consultation just turned out to be the safer way for people to engage with healthcare. And I think the bigger change that we also saw along with that, like from the consumer side, certainly the demand went up, and it was a very, very refreshing and significant jump, at least 450, 500% jump in a couple of days is what we suddenly saw for a bunch of our services. That was obviously encouraging, but that was a lot of stress because we had to deliver all that in a situation where logistics were broken, supply chains were just not happening, and every day would present new challenges, new opportunities, and new issues. And that's where what we felt was happen pretty quickly was the government took note, first of all, that digital healthcare needs to be a part of the health delivery architecture of the country. So when the first lockdown happened, when the prime minister came on TV and said, "Don't put pressure on the hospital system and use telemedicine," and then 2 days later we had the telemedicine guidelines, a very, very significant shift was beginning to happen that time. Similarly, the first lockdown guidelines mentioned the essential services for the country, and e-commerce for pharmaceuticals was designated as one of those services which were permitted during the lockdown. So all these were actually seismic events, because for many, many, many years these had been questions of how, what will be the model, regulatory interfacing, this, that, and suddenly it's not just something that they need to figure out. It's an essential service now that needs to be provided. So what we are seeing now is that the digital healthcare is becoming a part of the healthcare service delivery architecture of the country in a very meaningful way. And I think in 15th August, we would be expecting the National Digital Health Mission probably to be launched. And all of these are, sometimes it takes a crisis for um, these things were bound to happen. It would have happened over the next 3 years, 4 years. I think it just happened over 3-4 weeks. That's what, because if you see from just the telemedicine perspective, China came up with an internet hospital concept for telemedicine back in 2012. When COVID hit China, their entire ecosystem was ready for the home-based healthcare delivery. We took our time, but I think the benefit of it happening in India is at some point in some place, some people were always working on things. But now today, China is doing around 2.5 million daily online consultations with an explicit goal to reduce the load on the hospitals of the tertiary care for primary care staff. Now, in India, that entire market would be like 20, 30,000 consults a day today, probably 60, 80,000 consults a day. We still have a long way to go. But I think this is the moment of truth for this ecosystem at least.
I
Sangeeta, you want to say
I want to
something?
quickly add one thing to Prashant's comment. India's first teleconsult happened in the year 2000. So we connected our village with a super specialty hospital. So, as people who have been working on this system for a long time, it gives me great happiness and joy to see this happen. And I believe also that those who were ready have been able to respond quickly. Those who had scalable systems will be able to, really ramp up. But the important thing, I think, both in e-education, where, Zoom classes are happening, and in telemedicine, where now people are thinking that a WhatsApp call is a teleconsult, I just want to put one word of, caution, that we must do it right. Just connecting is perfect in a crisis, but ongoing, let's have the quality, let's do a proper electronic health record, let's have standards, let's make sure the doctor is certified and displays his registration number. Things like that are important for the quality and the sustainability of a country as, important, significant, and capable as India. And India is very capable in the healthcare field. Also, I want to give lots of credit to the customers or the consumers, because 80% of teleconsult users were first time users, but they adopted, they came on board, and because of their readiness for innovation, even healthcare providers were able to innovate. So we in fact tied up with hotels, Lemon Tree, OU, etc., and created observation and maintenance and isolation rooms. So we're running over 1,000 of those hotel rooms converted, but they're safe because they have a telemedicine overlay on them and we're able to supervise the patient. So innovation like that happened also because the consumer was ready to innovate. And this is also because of the fact that India has a digital backbone. Our mobile phone, smartphone users are in place, our connectivity is in place. And this is a powerful enabler that I give the government full credit for. So if you position that on top of a ready consumer, some good framework, and creative providers, I think there's a lot that we can do. And I believe also that we can do it for India as well as for the world. Because telemedicine is really a global phenomena where India can play a very active role. And on the pharmacy, I would really like to add, as people on 24/7, we have a digital pharmacy, but we also have like the country's largest network of physical pharmacies. And I think this combination of being physical and digital is really the long-term module or the formula. The phygital is going to be the way of the future. And I commend those teams as well. Some of them were in red zone, some of them had to come to work irrespective. So the entire healthcare warriors across the country, Apollo's our own team, but all the people, government, non-government, private, small nursing home, everybody must really be commended for what they have done, what they have withstood, and how they were so brave. I mean, small nurses in all-encompassing PPEs. It's images like that that I think we can never forget, and we should always be grateful to our healthcare workers. I have personally visited a COVID ward, not once, but multiple times, and seen there's a certain tension, there's a certain fear, and yet they go ahead smilingly and bravely and do what's right for the patient. So I hope this will always be remembered.
Okay, so continuing our discussion on technology, Swapna, I'll come to you and ask you, how do you see the role of technology shaping the healthcare industry in near future?
Thank you, Neetu. And first of all, I'd like to thank the whole fraternity of healthcare, pharma, life sciences. You guys are our soldiers in this very strange war. And thank you so much on behalf of everyone. Right? So let's talk about the role of technology. I think technology actually plays a role in every aspect of the life sciences domain. I'll give you a couple of examples of how Automation Anywhere is playing a very critical role in the front end, helping our caregivers in this very unprecedented scenario. So we have a hospital we're working with in the United Kingdom, Northampton General Hospital, whose oxygen tanks are dissipating oxygen towards the ventilation mechanisms right across the wards. Our bots and the whole mechanism of where a patient should be sent, which ward the patient should be sent, Is the oxygen getting balanced across the wards throughout the hospital? Is controlled by bots now. Now, why is that good? All this automation or use of artificial intelligence is good because it allows humans to do the important work, which is take care of an individual, which is invest more in finding the right medicines, right? So technology is an assistant to better our lives, and no more can that be important than in the life sciences domain. Another very quick example is the National Health Service in the United Kingdom. The forms that patients have to fill up in order to get tested or get registered for any sort of care still to a large extent is physical. So they actually write in a form and fill in a lot of data. The whole extraction of data from forms to any database, which is critical in life sciences, because once you get that data, you can move the patient ahead through the whole system and through the whole process, is now totally automated. The E28 forms, the case registration forms is completely automatable. The data extraction piece is automatable, which means humans were actually reading data and entering data into a database now are helping patients and helping the process go faster. This technology is not only used in the front end, it's also used in the back end for processing bills, really getting the patient to get the care quickly and be able to go home quickly. So we keep the patient as the center, and we assist, we're partners to all pharmaceutical companies, healthcare companies, and even labs. So today, even in India, if you look at ICMR, they have to be taking information from almost 1,300 labs, if I'm not mistaken, across India. So we're working with labs to ensure that all the forms that they get submitted by the patients from, the data is automatically extracted, entered into a database, and sent to the authorities immediately so things can get processed. So reporting, compliance, all areas, pharmacovigilance, even in the pharmaceutical industry, we have customers like Becton Dickinson, we have Cerner, EMR records, pharmacovigilance, accelerating the reporting, data aggregation, everything can be automated. So really large portions where technology can make an impact, accelerate patient healthcare, accelerate time to market for pharmaceutical companies. We're also working with pharma companies in India now who have adopted automation and are seeing a direct impact for time to market.
Yeah.
Improved on policy measures pertaining to use of robots and artificial intelligence in healthcare.
So if I get your question, Neetu, you broke up a bit in between, but I think you spoke about are there any policy violations in using AI or bots?
No, I was just asking that has government recently improved on policy measures regarding artificial intelligence in healthcare, in terms of healthcare?
See, it's typically the government organizations expect compliance for all the right reasons. And technology, remember, as I said, is an assist to humans. So as long as we're able to meet the audit and compliance mandates by various authorities, and Sangeeta ji was saying, typically sometimes states have their own regulations. Automation and AI is able to really help you audit even better because it removes human errors from the whole conversation, right? What a stressed human, especially today, people are under huge amount of stress. All that kind of gets removed from the conversation. So there is no violation of any regulation when it comes to using automation. In fact, it assists audits much, much better. And that's what all our customers have been saying as well.
Okay.
So maybe I can.
Yeah.
Multiple people. I'd just like to add, if I could. Sorry. I think it's. There are two ways to look at technology. One is to look at it from what is permissible by the government, but the second is also to look at what is evergreening for you as a company, right? So we are looking actively at all technology right now with three lenses in mind, right? The first lens is what experience is this creating for the user? Replicating a physical experience through a digital route, is not digital, right? You have to create a new user experience here, right? So that's the first one. The second is actually efficiency. How does what we're doing create more efficiency for the user, right? And I think that's the second thing that we're looking. And the third is resiliency, right? So is how resilient is this technology if it was ever to be disrupted, or we had a disruption event like COVID or a pandemic change. So we are looking at these three screens to screen any potential technology. The most important is the user experience. It cannot be just the replication of a physical experience facilitated through an iPad interface. It has to be beyond that. So those are the lens we're applying, and I think it's really, one is regulation, but I just like to go back. It's also a resolve that every individual company wants to get to in improving all these three factors.
Okay, so we have had a broad overview of the sector, and now maybe it's time to get into the specifics. So Umang, I'll come back to you again. Cipla has been an active player when it comes to COVID-19 drugs, but huge demand of these drugs has actually given way to black markets. And I just want you to take us through how are you countering this challenge? And also, given the global supply constraints of drugs, how are you placed to fill the gap? And government is government really supportive enough for the local manufacturing, if we talk about?
So I think there are multiple parts. I don't think the issue is so much about local manufacturing here, because frankly, I sense a new level of collaboration between foreign MNC-based companies in India, right? In no time did 7 companies out of India prepare to give remdesivir out to the market, right? So today, remdesivir is being supplied by 6 or 7 Indian companies, and there's a level of collaboration with Gilead. So let's come to black marketing, because I think it's something that you've raised, and it's something that we're hearing about very often. So the first thing that we've done is, I think from a Cipla perspective, every single vial that we have sent out has been accounted. We're actually transparent with the data we're putting out. We're putting out data on how we are distributing this across states. We're putting out data on how this is being distributed across particular distributors within the country. The second is when we began to hear about shortages and we began to hear about just the black market that was running, we started looking at, we've set up our own helpline, right? So if you're finding that there's no stock in the market, or you're finding that there's probably an exorbitant rate being charged for something that you want, call a helpline, right? A helpline is there to help. It's going to direct you to where the product is available. It's going to direct you to what the right pricing is. And we've set up this helpline. It's just amazing, the number of calls that we get every day. It's overwhelming, but it's been amazing. And we're truly happy that we could make the difference. The third is just keeping a track vial by vial. We now have a full registry of which patient was prescribed the drug by whom, right? And of course, within that, at times, data becomes a little bit difficult to collect. But we're trying to do all of that to arrest just the inequitable supply of remdesivir and tocilizumab. And I think we're being helped a lot by automation, but a lot of it is also just being done to make sure that hospitals get this before the rest of the public does. So there's a lot of supply to the hospitals we've tried to ensure, as well as with technology. So a lot is happening in that field. I'm happy to take additional questions on that.
Sure. No, I think I want to. Prashant, yeah.
I can possibly attest to some. Yeah, no, I was saying I can actually attest to some of these because we work with Cipla as well and a bunch of other companies, and certainly the control over the supply chain and track and trace is very, very strong. For a lot of these medicines, they are only supplied directly to the patients in the hospital. So when we get demand, and I think in the early phases, and that's where people were taking so much initiative themselves. So in the early phase, I would say senior managers of pharmaceutical companies, including Cipla, just told us to tell the patients to give their mobile numbers, and they will directly connect with the patient and have it supplied in the hospital. And we did it for hundreds of cases, that we would just let the patient know that you need the medicine, you please call the company and it will be directly supplied to your hospital. Thereafter came the Cipla helpline, and that made life easier for everyone. But I think the initial phases was everyone putting in human energy to make sure that they do their best, and then thereafter came systems, processes in a lot of detail. And as being a part of the distribution ecosystem, I can attest to that yes, while we did not get to participate in the retail side of the drugs, because that this is not a medicine for the retail consumer, but we did get a lot of demand, and the pharma companies actually were very, very active in directly taking it up and fulfilling it.
I want to add just one line, and I think that, the fact is that many people did suffer. We were able to get uninterrupted supply. Our relationship with pharma companies has been great. But I've heard many of these stories. I think it's very important for all governments, do a regional language scrolling, saying there is no shortage, get your medicine, get remdesivir in the hospital. Something like that is very important. Otherwise, advertise the helpline that the pharma companies are having. Here, the knowledge needs to be with the individual and the patient, who's the one who's really become a little susceptible to this black marketeering. So let's use all media, social media, to stop it.
Right, Sangeeta. So we'll take up on research and development during COVID-19 pandemic. So globally, this pandemic has put the spotlight on research and development. So there is also an increasing concern that pandemics may become more frequent, and hence the need for new and better drugs. So asking you, Umang, how are you pivoting to meet this challenge, and how can the government help to boost this R&D of new drugs in India?
So it's a great question. I think it has two connotations. So let me try and work both. One is the IP construct, right? Because very often for new pandemics, you need strong IP for collaborations to work with multinational corporations. And I think that framework and that template is now existing in India, where foreign companies and MNCs can work with domestic manufacturers. But I think there is this double line that we should avoid, right? IP is IP. It needs to be protected to some extent. And I think that trust enables and fosters collaboration. The second is, I think for a while, maybe more from an Indian context and more from our own country's context, we have excellent chemists, right? We supply 30% or 40% of the generic medicines to the US, right? I think in India, we have not fostered innovation in biology as much, right? So the whole art of discovering a new drug is essentially a combination of chemistry and biology. The art of reproducing a generic drug is more chemistry, right? So I think the whole emphasis in trying to create this whole biology universe of creating a startup ecosystem, of trying to create more for innovation. You see, the other side of innovation, which we don't realize, is innovation is costly and it must be paid for. The reason the US attracts the maximum amount of innovation is because there's a system that pays for this innovation. And somewhere in India, we need to have this balance. I think that's government policy, where a lot of innovation should either be given IP protection, and there has to be a mechanism where this innovation can be paid for by insurers and otherwise, right? So I think I would leave those two things. But from our perspective, there are lots of drugs that we are trying to repurpose for COVID. There are screens we are running. We're looking at human assays. We're looking at SBDD, structure-based drug design, to figure out what could hit the spike protein in the drug. So a lot of that work is also happening. There have been some hits, right? And there have also been, we've had these hits, we've tried them in clinics. Obviously, they haven't shown the same amount of responsiveness. So a lot of work is happening. I truly believe that in the next 1 year, the vaccine may come, but there will also be a pharmaceutical solution to treating this. I'm quite hopeful the human enterprise will deliver something, and I hope it does, right, along with the vaccine. But a lot of work is happening in terms of doing this.
Okay, so I'm going to rope in Swapna here. We just want to understand, Swapna, if artificial intelligence can play a role in drug discovery. And also, how do you think telemedicine will shape up in the post-COVID era?
So I think artificial intelligence is already playing a very big role in drug discovery, especially the complexity of the whole process. It's necessary that huge amounts of data are processed in minimal time, and there is a learning mechanism that the software adopts to predict, right? So there's a lot that's already happening. But I also want to add that foundational to using AI is adopting automation. And I'll tell you why. If you have a person entering data from one place to the other, and then that data is being run through a machine learning algorithm to predict XYZ, you have lost the purpose of using technology, right? So, foundationally, I would first say that in the pharmaceutical industry, and this is being adopted not only by companies, pharmaceutical companies abroad who have their back end offices in India, it's also being adopted by pharmaceutical companies in India today. Now, where can automation play a role and AI as well? Definitely during the drug discovery process, but clinical trials, right? Patient onboarding, handling complaints, then in the supply chain, assessing all the subcomponents that are needed to build a drug, which go into thousands sometimes, monitoring that supply chain, automating the fact that you have to put an order into the supplier, processing the invoice, ensuring reminders are sent. All this can be automated, and then humans can really concentrate on ensuring that the time to market for the drug is accelerated. So that's what I have to say, Neetu.
Okay.
Sure. I'm going to bring the discussion back to healthcare facilities, and I'm going to go to Anil and really ask him that you sort of elaborated in detail about how you sort of rose to the occasion in terms of creating infrastructure, creating facilities to battle COVID. And even Sangeeta has very nicely detailed the entire journey. And I'm sure, all of this, you would have realized that there were certain mistakes made and there were certain things you could have done differently. Do you want to take us through what you think? And I'm not talking about Fortis, I'm looking at the big picture. You want to sort of take us through the learnings or the mistakes that you remember?
So I think I break those down into common and whatever. So I think it's been a learning journey right through for everybody. I think the government has learned, the private sector has learned, the public hospitals have learned a lot as well. So if I look at the first was what you mentioned, which is how do the government and the private sector work together. I think that was a learning that we all went through together. The second aspect about testing is another large area where I think there was a lot of change and evolution in terms of what's the optimal model and how do you make sure that there is adequate testing and control on the quality of testing at the same time as well. That's the second. The third, I think in the hospitals themselves, we went through a lot of change in terms of how do we make sure first that we are protecting the staff and we are not becoming a source of infection ourselves. And that I think we went through a great deal of learning over in terms of how do we prepare for this new normal. And I think we were in the forefront because subsequently as the economies opened up, the same learnings can be applied in many, many different settings. And I think, that all came out of the way that we had to deal with how do you deal with cafeterias, how do you deal with staff that meet each other and so on and so forth. How do you prevent, fundamentally we are social people, and how do you prevent us from meeting each other when we're all coming to work in a healthcare setting? So I think that's one example. A lot about protection of our staff in terms of coverage, securing them in terms of insurance and so on. These are things that we all had to learn on the fly and move along. And then, of course, finally on the protocols and the medical treatment part as well. You've seen the kind of changes that have happened in the protocols as new discoveries have happened and as new things have been tried and have worked in reducing the mortality rates or the morbidity rates and so on. So I think if you look at all that, there's been plenty of learning. I think if I see the other piece, just commenting on the technology part, I think this was a tipping point when it came to technology adoption by both patients as well as by doctors. Some of these things have been available for a long time, like Sangeeta ji also mentioned. So telemedicine or video consults have been available, but adoption at both levels has been slow. And I think this was the tipping point that made patients far more accepting and understanding of this medium, and it also encouraged very, very wide range of doctors from very senior ones as well to quickly take it up and make it a reality, virtually overnight. So those are just some examples, and I think, like I said, it was a tipping point for the industry. and there'll be a lot more that follows as we go along.
Yeah. So I'm sorry, we have to wrap up now. Not wrap up quickly, but very soon because we are just 10 minutes more to go, and we have some very interesting questions from our viewers. Before I take that, I want to quickly go to Sangeeta, and again, the same question posed to you, but then I would want you to take a big picture view of the healthcare ecosystem, and in that sense, and I'm going to put out some challenges that we saw that the hospitals, insurance companies, government had to deal with. One is, of course, the whole fragmented ecosystem. Something that you said, you're present in different geographies and you have to conform to different guidelines and different protocols, etc. Then there's also about insurance having to deal with hospitals, customers sort of getting confused between the two, cashless claims getting rejected. When we talk to insurance companies, they say that healthcare is unregulated, whereas we are regulated. So it's extremely important to control pricing. GI Council is planning to move forward to have uniform pricing structure and also standardize the healthcare costs. So just move 30,000 feet away and look at the healthcare ecosystem and sort of just quickly, if you were to wrap up and tell us, the gaping holes and how that can be sort of fixed.
Your question is the subject of a whole thesis, but you want me to do it quickly.
I'm so sorry,
but let me take a shot at this. I think the first aspect we have to look at is that healthcare is about three things. It's about access. People should be able to get care. It's about availability, and it's about quality. And these are three, points in a pyramid, and we need to make sure that all of them are well structured. So people are able to make things affordable by compromising on quality. Where do you find that optimal balance? And then if you give, a certain quality of care and you're unable to make it accessible, even geographically for the whole country. So first we have to remember that. Then you take universal healthcare access as a framework. And here, more insurance, greater hospitals, standardization, capability is one aspect. And an ability to reimburse in a fair manner so that the hospital is able to survive and to replenish itself, because technology is changing every 3 or 4 years. And if you said hospitals are in the private sector and they take bank loans and they have shareholders, they need an allocable surplus to service these. So we cannot look at them as the same of a government hospital who has not invested or put public money or tax money into building their infrastructure. Their materials are coming from Jana Aushadhi and their salaries are paid. So we need to understand, yet I want public and private to be measured on the same yardsticks as quality. So that's one whole aspect. The second aspect I really want to put, into the consideration stack, because it's very important, is the aspect of prevention. Because if we simply look at trying to meet up to the disease burden, which is growing every year, and the costs of healthcare are growing faster than the GDP in every country all over the world. So we need to take a pivot and maybe use this point of time to say, how can we prevent? So this aspect of early detection, all of us know that people who had comorbidities like diabetes and hypertension, especially if they were uncontrolled, were not able to fight COVID as well as the healthy people. So how do we keep our population as healthy as possible so that irrespective of which infection comes, which problem comes, aging will happen, how we can fight this better? So these are two very important pillars. One is the whole aspect of enabling care and universal health coverage. The second is primary care, prevention, and keeping people healthy. And we have to do that in a framework of transparency, of mutual win-win. It is not, you cannot say that, let the customer pay because ultimately they will not be happy. You cannot say the hospitals have to come at free or discount because they won't be able to add beds or add technology. So we need a framework of win-win. We need a framework of transparency, ethics, standards, and then you put the technology layer, because technology can enhance operations, bring care within the reach of people, and enable faster, quicker, and most importantly, in a country where we have a tremendous shortage of doctors and nurses. If you use AI right, our cardiac risk model, which I'm very, very proud of, will enable a general practitioner to do about 80% level of diagnosis as an advanced cardiologist. So using this technology and AI models to enable the whole ecosystem to deliver a better quality of care, and then finally put the most of it into people's hand so that healthcare becomes everyone's responsibility.
Sure.
And we can do it, and I hope India shows the way.
Sure. I'm afraid we'll have to wrap up very soon now. But before we do, I'm going to take some questions from the viewers. Um, uh, to start with, thanks a lot for taking our questions and sort of answering all of them in such great detail and with such passion, I must say. But coming to our viewers' question, Arvind Jain is asking, do you think online and telemedicine habit will revert once vaccine is launched? I think it's a very interesting question. And I'm sure you guys must be having a view already on this and must be deliberating on this. So, feel free to sort of answer.
So
No, I think when the quantum of change that's happened, I think this will be the new norm. And that's what we are seeing, that even as the unlock has started and OPD footfalls in the hospitals are increasing, our video consults are not reducing either, and they're also climbing. So I think we've established a new normal. That's because patient acceptance and doctor acceptance have both happened virtually overnight. And I think that's going to be the new norm.
And I think that we will learn how to interposition where the physical touch is important and where telemedicine is appropriate. And these protocols will evolve. Follow-up, post-operative care, patients from a distance, medication compliance, all these fall clearly in telemedicine. Emergency access to a higher specialist, multi-speciality tumor boards, all these are, telemedicine. But pre-surgical evaluations, routine checkups by your general practitioner, where you need to do an examination. So, the parameters of appropriateness are available, and patients and doctors will comply in this new system, and we'll all be the better for it.
And I think we are entering a very important phase, and it's just we just gotten started with telemedicine for this country. Like,
yes.
As they said, 2.5 million for China, 50,000 for India. It's it's too early for it to be anywhere close to saturation. But I think the important thing that will happen is that the doctor-patient relationship will move to a more life cycle relationship. The patient can connect with the doctor even when the patient goes back and is at home. The doctor-patient interaction will move into more a disease management kind of an interaction where the doctor will decide whether a physical visit is required or not, because otherwise for a lot of things the care can still be provided and will be provided in a regular manner. Data will keep coming in through connected devices, interactions will keep happening, and thereafter that will be a better experience for everybody, especially the patient.
Okay, there is another question from Mr. Karthik R. So I would like Swapna to add to this. This is a related question. Though there have been improvements in telemedicine, how can we take it to rural India where someone with no internet or smartphone can access it?
No internet on
Swapna,
no internet or smartphone. Was that the question? Okay.
I have an answer.
Yes, I can read it out again.
Please, Sangeeta ji, go ahead.
Okay,
no, Sangeeta ji, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. But, there is a government infrastructure, and we've been working on it for the last 5 to 7 years, which is the common service centers. There are 600,000 CSCs, and all CSCs are enabled with telemedicine. So, over a period of time, every Indian will have a smartphone, but in the interim, they can go to their village CSC and access telemedicine. So it is absolutely possible, and we should acknowledge the Ministry of IT, Niti Aayog, and sorry on the research point, I think ICMR deserves a lot of kudos. They've done some tremendous things in this difficult time.
Yes, and they're really adopting technology, Sangeeta ji.
Yes.
The ICMR, they're doing fantastic work. And on the telemedicine front, right, I think as Prashant was saying, it is just the beginning. There's so much that can be communicated between a patient and a doctor. If I take a photograph of a report, for example, extraction of data can be automated, filled into the database. The doctor, that data is taken, assessed through multiple systems, AI is used, and as Sangeeta ji was saying, a first level of suggestion from the doctor to the patient can be obtained within a matter of minutes. That's the beauty.
fraction of a second. Absolutely,
There you go.
Swapna.
So,
And then you'll imagine an AI model working on COVID diagnosis in
Yes.
CT and X-ray in the
Yes.
middle of the night,
Yeah,
Yes.
Uma,
which is
you
what
want
is
to say
happening
something?
today.
let me-
So things
Yes.
like that are happening right now. And
Yes.
this is what the world can be proud of.
Sure, Umang,
Excellent.
you
So
want
let
to
me
say
give-
something? We'll very quickly hear you
yeah,
before we wrap.
let me give an alternate view to this, right? I have seen, frankly, because we deliver medicines pretty much to tier 4 towns, right? So there is medicines that go to tier 3, to metros, and to tier 4 cities. I just want to leave a thought. The sophistication of how some of these tier 4 towns are taking up this, right? In terms of trying to map out, using technology and smartphones in trying to map out the drug supply in their territories is far more than the metros today, right? So we should not be surprised in how quickly this wave could come. And I don't think we can argue at any point that there is no Wi-Fi or internet in these places. Actually, a lot of them are beginning to have it. So I see more sophistication in the tier 4 cities and the tier 3 cities from a distribution and technology perspective than I see in our metros.
I
Right?
agree.
So I think, yeah, so I just think we should be aware that the trend will actually be faster there than it will be in the metros.
Super. Yeah, I think that's all. We are out of time. We have 1 minute, 1 minute extra taking. So it's time for us to wrap up. Thank you all panelists for such a nice discussion. What I gather is we're at the cusp of a huge digital transformation, and I look forward to the journey from here on. Thank you, viewers, for watching.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank
Bye.
you. Separately,